All right, thanks for tuning in to the OFN Meeting Room, our lads football network, and we're going to talk Cincinnati Bengals football for the first time in quite a while. Actually, we did not get an opportunity to talk Bengals football before the draft, or at least I don't think we. I know we didn't discuss the Bengals with my special guest coming up, that's for sure. But the Bengals, and I'm a big fan of Duke Tobin. I've covered the Bengals for our lads draft guide the last few years, so they're one of my teams that I'm responsible for, and that's what makes me a big Duke Tobin fan. But we're going to cover and talk Bengals football here on the show today with our special guest, James Rapien, who covers the Bengals for Sports Illustrated and is the host of the Bengals Locked On podcast. James, nice to finally get an opportunity to talk to you.
Absolutely.
All
Thanks for having
right.
me.
So first, since you are a new guest to the network, I want to find out a little about your background. How long have you, first of all, you a Bengals fan?
Yeah, I would say that. I think that once you start to cover the team, you leave the fandom behind. But I'm a Cincinnati native. I covered the team from 2016 through about half of the 2018 season. And now I'm back covering them again for Sports Illustrated as of April 1. So it's been fun, and it's good to be back.
And covering the team for Sports Illustrated. Tell me, and of course you got the Locked On Bengals podcast. Tell me a little bit about those ventures and your relationships with those companies.
As far as Sports Illustrated is concerned, I'm trying to bring the best Bengals coverage out there, right? And so whether it's videos, whether it's different opinions or features, whatever the case may be, I want it all in one place for Bengals fans at allbengals.com. So that's been my goal. That's what we discussed before I accepted the position. And I think we're off to a good start. I think we're building in the right direction, and given the uncertainty and really the unknown of sports right now with everything going on in the world and COVID-19, I think we've done a good job to give Bengals fans an outlet and give them the best information possible. And then as far as the Locked On Bengals podcast goes, I was the original host of the Locked On Bengals podcast. That also started in 2016. I left my post at the end of 2018 because I started to cover the Indians and the Cavaliers. So Bengals fans obviously wouldn't want to hear my take on the team. But I was back as of last month. May 1 was my first show with Jake Lisco, my co-host. And yeah, we're excited. I think Bengals fans are excited given what they've done this offseason. And I'm certainly excited to be covering the team.
Yeah, if you're not on board as a Bengals fan now, then I don't know if you're ever going to be on board, because this is a great time with Burrow and really a good class that we'll talk about here in a few minutes. And of course, as always, free agency. First of all, what did you think about free agency? Because it's interesting. The Bengals usually don't go out shopping outside their organization for big name targets, but DJ Reader was a pretty big pickup for them. Where do you think, as far as the whole psychological transformation with the organization, with the new staff last year, and now Joe Burrow, how is it all changing, especially with the fans? Because I know there's a love-hate relationship with the team there, or at least ownership.
You're right. And I think that the Bengals knew they needed to do this. I think Mike Brown knew he needed to do it after 4 straight losing seasons. Getting rid of Marvin Lewis just wasn't enough. The Bengals' way was stale. And it sounds great, right, to draft and develop your own talent. But when you get it wrong in the draft, and they did in 2015, they did in 2014, really 2017, like a lot of their drafts, if you look back, there's a lot of busts or question marks that could end up being busts. And so they needed to address some holes in free agency, and they were aggressive. And it's really something I've called on for many years. And I think fans, all Bengals fans really across the country have called on. So it was a breath of fresh air to see them, one, get players that address weaknesses, but they weren't veteran players on the back end. DJ Reader, entering his 5th year, is a defensive tackle that's going to command double teams and make Geno Atkins' life easier, right? Trey Waynes, I think he's going to be an upgrade from Dre Kirkpatrick. who had some good moments, the former first rounder, had some good moments in Cincinnati. But Trey Waynes is a guy who's a more sure tackler, which is something the Bengals certainly prioritized this offseason. And then I liked a lot of their low value, good value, low risk signings, whether it's Mackenzie Alexander on a 1-year deal, Josh Bynes, the linebacker from Baltimore, on a 1-year deal. I think they did a lot of good things. That defense looks a lot different. And then on offense, they had the weapons for the most part. And I know we'll get into them when we talk about the draft. But Xavier Su'a-Filo, I think he was a big get at guard. They think they can get the most out of him. He's a former second-round pick from the Texans in 2014. He's underachieved so far during his NFL career, but they feel pretty good about him. So it'd be interesting to see how he plays up front.
Well, let's go right to it and start with Mr. Burrow. Look, I'm not going to go into everything that makes Joe Burrow a really good quarterback, because that's been talked about quite a bit over the last several months. Just, I guess, tell me about how excited the fans are to have Burrow there, and is there any doubt at all, or is there something specific, maybe the most important question I can ask you, that he does have to work on to be the best that he can be?
I don't think there's any doubt amongst the coaches that I've talked to on and off the record. I don't think there's any doubt among the fan base. I think this is the most excited the fans have been really outside of the 2005 season. And that was the first year that they had gone to the playoffs in nearly a decade and a half. And they won the division that year. And obviously it ended with Carson Palmer getting injured, and they lost to the Steelers in the playoffs. But outside of that season, I can't remember anything like this. And that includes the year they drafted Carson Palmer first overall in 2003. I just think the fan base is ecstatic to add a guy, a talent like Burrow. And as much as it is his on-field physical ability, it's his demeanor, it's his intangibles, it's his leadership, all of those things that aren't going to necessarily show up on the back of his card, his football card, or show up in the box score, but things that when you look back as a Bengals fan, even when things were going well for Andy Dalton, even when things were going well for Carson Palmer, you look back and you're like, well, was Andy really the leader? Was Carson Palmer mentally tough enough to deal with everything that comes with being the number one pick and going to the Bengals? And I think there aren't any doubts there with Burrow. Now, as far as things he can improve on, I think the key, really, two things. One, there are questions about his arm strength, and those are well documented. And while I do think that he can overcome that's going to be something he might have to adjust to a little bit, because timing is everything. So I could see some early struggles as he learns to adjust to life in the NFL. And the other is a thing that I haven't seen mentioned much. Joe Burrow doesn't like the slide. And when you're a franchise quarterback, especially one that's athletic enough to move around, and he is, and he's comfortable moving around and trying to get that first down, you better slide. So I hope that the Bengals talk to him and convince him that sliding and living to play for another down is sometimes the best way to go about things, because otherwise he's going to take some big shots in the NFL with these fast linebackers that can run 4.4s these days. So I think that's one of the underrated things that not a lot of people are talking about, but certainly something that he needs to prioritize, and the coaches need to make sure he's working on, is sliding effectively to keep himself safe and keep him injury free.
And the other thing, and this isn't a negative, but he was great. He was the Heisman deserving winner, but let's keep in mind that he was playing at another level where he had maybe the best offensive line with the best receivers and a number one running back. It's not going to be the case in the NFL. So that little adjustment, and a lot of these big time quarterbacks make them, that's what's going to, but you know what? Over the years, we're seeing it with Patrick Mahomes, even though he only got in, a start or two as a rookie, and then boom, took off. I just think, we know Burrow is, of course, going to start day one, but I don't know. I think maybe because of the way the game has translated more like to the college game, and the college game is reflecting the NFL game, and it's just become easier for quarterbacks in college to make that transition. No longer do you have to wait 5 years for Terry Bradshaw to get it. No longer do you have to, does John Elway look like a complete imbecile in his first, season, where he's just chasing and looking like maybe he doesn't even belong in the league. I just don't think that that's, when you got a guy like Joe Burrow and his talent, I think he's going to have a pretty good year as a rookie.
Absolutely. I agree. And I think that that is part of it is the NFL game has so many similarities to the college game, and the coaches are smart now. They're not that they weren't smart before, but they're not as stubborn with what they want to run. Instead of saying, "Hey, Joe Burrow, you're a square fit in the round hole." No, no, no. They're gonna dictate and change the playbook to make sure it fits Joe Burrow's strengths. Now, with that being said, he ran a pro style offense at
Right.
LSU, and that's the other thing here is I think that
Yep.
translates. So while the personnel up front on the offensive line might not be as good, I do think he's in a position to post big numbers. That doesn't mean that the Bengals are going to win a bunch of games this year. But if I have Joe Burrow as my backup quarterback in fantasy,
Yeah,
I feel
I
all right
agree.
about it, because I think he's got weapons. And, if AJ Green, here's the other thing, if AJ Green stays healthy, I'm not sure he's had a quarterback as good as Joe Burrow, and I'm not ripping Andy Dalton. I don't think that that's been the case. From a leadership standpoint, from an arm standpoint, because I do think he's got at least as good of an arm from arm strength wise as Andy, but he's way more accurate. And so I think that this could be the start of something special. I think a lot of people feel that way, but he could post some pretty decent numbers as a rookie, despite having a flawed offensive
Okay,
line
now
up
with
front.
their second pick, they went to another player who won his championship, not last year, but the year before, wide receiver T. Higgins. And Higgins is a player with elite ball skills, graceful footwork, tremendous hands. But there's also a little bit of knock on him, which is he's not the quickest. His 40 time at the combine wasn't as fast as some of the other top receivers in his class. Sort of, I mean, it kind of reminds me a little bit of how they're knocking Burrow because of his arm strength. But Burrow and Higgins were the best of their positions, basically, in all of college football, and that does translate. And Higgins, to get him in the second round, they must have been really ecstatic.
They were. Absolutely, they were. They had a first round grade on him. I think they sort of expected him to be gone in the top 20. And the fact that he was there, and I know most pundits had him, in the first round, usually in the top 27 picks or so. So he falls to 33, and they're not worried about his speed. I think there's a couple factors at play when it comes to that. One, he's only 21 years old, so he hasn't reached his athletic prime yet. Two, there were some rumors that he was a little dinged up when he ran that 40, and who knows if that's the case. But I think that they view him and they say, you know what, he doesn't need to be the fastest because he has such a
Oh yeah,
long wingspan and he can go up and get it. And he's 6'4", and really he's in a lot of ways AJ Green, just not as good of an athlete. A really good athlete, but AJ Green's a freak, and he's once in every 10, 15 years type of player. And so I think they really were happy to get T. Higgins where they did. And they think he's a great compliment to Joe Burrow, because you're talking about an extremely accurate quarterback who isn't afraid to take chances downfield, who isn't afraid to throw it up. And you got a wide receiver who can go up and get it, who's great after the catch. I think that's probably his most underrated trait that no one realizes about T. Higgins unless you really watched him at Clemson. He can take a
that's
slant
right.
to the house or a screen or anything like that. And a lot of 6'4" players don't do that, right? They're just more jump ball, deep threat type guys. But he can work, within 5 yards, 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. So I think it was another quality pick by the Bengals, and it makes a lot of sense. And then the last thing here on Burrow and Higgins, it's really familiar because back in 2011 they went Green fourth overall, and then Andy Dalton 35th overall, and that worked out well. They're hoping for even better results this time with Burrow first overall and
Yeah, it
T.
should
Higgins
be
33rd
exciting
overall.
for Burrow, at least if everybody's healthy. Week one, you got Higgins and Green and of course Tyler Boyd. That's something that he better relish, because he may only have that for a couple of years. You don't have that much talent at wide receiver very often, so take advantage of it when you can. We move over to defense with the next several picks, and it's interesting. I was going over my draft notes, uh, and this is what I came up with. I was trying to get the background of Lou Anarumo, the coordinator for the Bengals, and what I found out is that he wanted to run a hybrid 3-4 scheme. That's what that's my research. Couldn't do it like they wanted to last year, especially when you come in a new team. You got to deal with the personnel that you have. But one of the things that he wanted was exactly what Zach Taylor wanted, his quarterback. So Zach Taylor got his quarterback of the offense, and Anarumo wanted his quarterback of the defense. And so I was writing down what he wanted. He wanted a great communicator, a leader, a playmaker, and someone who can cover tight ends and running backs. Can you say Logan Wilson?
He completely fits the bill. You're 100%, and I haven't even thought about it that way, right? As Lou Anarumo gets his quarterback of the defense, but that's a perfect description. I mean, team captain at Wyoming, ultra athletic, yet has the size. He ran a 4.63 40, and yet he's 6'2", 240, so or 241, I think. So I think it's a perfect match for what they want to do. And they had a high second round grade on him. If they would have traded down in the second round from 33 to 38, let's say, I think they would have considered Logan Wilson there. So the fact that he falls to the third round, pick 65, I know they were sweating bullets at the end of round 2, hoping that he fell. And when he did, I think that this, in their minds, might be their best value pick because they love that they got him. He was the top player by far on their board. And he just really fits everything they want to do. They expect him to be a 4-down linebacker. They think he could contribute right away, both on defense and special teams. And he can certainly grow into that quarterback of the defense. I mentioned Josh Bynes earlier. That's a guy that maybe starts right away, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if Logan Wilson starts by midseason or worst case, next year in this year plays a lot on defense, especially in passing situations, because he's great in coverage. And as good as he is in coverage, I think he's even better against the run because he's got that perfect blend of size and speed that you look for in a modern linebacker.
Let's talk about the second linebacker chosen right after Wilson. Picks-wise, it took a while, but 4th round, Akeem Gaither from App State, the Sun Belt Defensive Player of the Year. Now, a little bit undersized, but you're talking about someone with off-the-charts ability to chase, cover running backs out of the backfield. That's exactly what he did. Impressed everybody at the Senior Bowl. The team coached him at the Senior Bowl. And this is a pattern that we've seen from the Bengals, too. They like those players, and why not, that demonstrate, especially when you get an opportunity to see them up close at the Senior Bowl, and then you get an opportunity to coach them. So how do you see him specifically fitting in based on his size limitations, but what he can excel in? How do the Bengals going to work him into their defense?
I think initially he's an instant special teamer, as most linebackers are that are drafted in the mid rounds during their rookie year. But I think you can move him all around. I think his best attribute is probably his versatility right now. He can come off the edge. As you mentioned, he can cover linebackers out of the backfield. You feel good about him, even though he's undersized, going up against tight ends because he has that athleticism. And he's a big hitter. Even though he's 224 pounds, he's not afraid to deliver big hits. And it's just part of their vision, getting these fast, young linebackers that can cover a lot of ground. And when you look at the division they're in, I think it makes a ton of sense because Akeem Gaither and Logan Wilson, they're going to be challenged to stop Lamar Jackson in that Ravens rushing attack. You know, Mark Ingram, now J.K. Dobbins. You look at the Browns, I mean, Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. It's hard to slow those guys down. And you got to cover them out of the backfield. You got to be athletic. You got to be able to run. And Akeem Gaither does all of those things. They liked him a lot. I think the one downside or the one question mark and concern is his injury history. There was rumors, and I'll say that in some reports about his knee and some bone on bone and things like that. Here's what the coaches said, though, because we asked Lou Anarumo on draft day after they picked him. He was cleared by the medical staff. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been on our board. So the Bengals feel good about him. They think he'll be 100% healthy for training camp and good to go. And suddenly, within 2 picks, that linebacker room looked much different.
Yeah, it's almost like you mentioned Lamar Jackson. You get the feeling that maybe that's exactly why they targeted him, knowing that Lamar Jackson was going to be in that division for a lot of years. We need a spy. We need somebody that can spy that guy for the next, 5 or 6 years. Now we have him. So I could see that as definitely one of the big reasons they grabbed him. You tell you what, let's round out the linebackers with Marcus Bailey. Since even though he went to the 7th round, speaking of injuries, because he's had 2 major knee injuries in his career, including last year. Taking a chance on a player like this, though, in the 7th round, that's not bad. I mean, you get a player that, if he can be healthy, will definitely make your team. And again, work in special teams and things of that nature. But, another player with good tackling ability, sort of like what you said with Gaither, that could lay a good hit.
Absolutely. And it's a risk, right? It's a risk, but at the same time, I would much rather take a risk on an elite talent potentially in the 7th round versus a guy that you don't think is even going to
Absolutely.
make the roster,
Sure.
even if he does stay healthy. And so you're right, Marcus Bailey, he's torn the ACL in both of his knees once as a freshman. Then he made, I believe, 38 starts, straight starts, before tearing the one in his right knee just 2 games into his senior year. He's a lot like these other 2 guys. He's great in coverage. He's athletic, has great instincts. And I will tell you, in talking with him, and we conference called with him right after the draft, he is extremely motivated. And when you fall to the 7th round and there's going to be doubts about your draft status because of injury, who knows if it works out? But I think this is a kid that's easy to root for because he's just really determined and motivated. And you could feel it, even though it was a virtual meeting, what he was going to bring to the table and how hungry he was to prove himself. So he's a guy that has great accolades, was great during his junior year at Purdue. And the Mel Kipers of the world had a 3rd round grade on him. So it's purely based on tape. So he's a talent that gives you tremendous value in the 7th round. And he could contribute as a rookie on
Sure.
special teams, or maybe he doesn't, and maybe they try to, keep him on ice a bit and make sure he's 100% healthy. But yeah, I like the pick there. I think it's the perfect wild card in the 7th round, because if it pans out, you look like a genius, and if it doesn't,
Yeah,
then it's not a big deal because you just
exactly.
invested a 7th round
All
pick in him.
right. Khalid Kareem went with the 5th round pick to the Bengals. Another really tough hitter and a good athlete, a player. And I want to, couple of things I want to talk to you about here is Kareem. He's your typical 4-3 defensive end. And the Bengals, again, have been running that for some years. But I kind of started earlier talking about how they want to run hybrid 3-4. So how do you think, talk about Kareem, of course, but how do you think, and I know, I mean, today, in the day of NFL defenses, there's no more 4-3-3-4. Everybody runs different variations of both. But if you had to guess statistically, what will the Bengals end up running more of this year, 4-3 or 3-4?
I think they're set up to run 3-4. I do. I think that their goal is to limit Geno Atkins snaps and maximize his efficiency. So they bring in DJ Reader. Their goal is to bring in a bunch of speed in the middle part of that defense, which they've done. We haven't mentioned Jonah Williams, who's kind of the perfect hybrid safety linebacker who's still on the roster. So I would say there's certainly going to be a lot of 3-4. As for what Kareem brings, I think that they view him as an end, and I think he could contribute it. And the key here, really, and I look back to last year, they didn't really have anyone to play behind Carlos Dunlap if Dunlap went down or got injured. And Andrew Brown had to kick it outside at times. And I know that was tough on him. That's not what they view him as. And they had to move him out there at times. So they get a guy in Kareem who could get some playing time right away as a rookie. And they like him a lot, and he's obviously athletic. And if they need to play him standing up, they could do that as well. So it's another guy. This pick was a little surprising in the moment, but you look at it, and they were really their biggest offseason goal, I think, was to overhaul the defense that they were frustrated about because it was old, it was slow, and they needed a facelift. And Kareem was kind of along with Marcus Bailey, but Kareem was kind of the finishing touch on that of a guy that can contribute on a regular basis starting
Okay,
in week
now
one.
let's talk about the only offensive lineman that the team took, and that was round 6. And I know how Bengals fans feel about the offensive line situation with the Bengals because I can see it. I look at their depth charts. This is our lads. It's an obvious thing to do. Now, Hakeem Adeniji from Kansas is a 4-year starter at tackle, first team Big 12. All his experiences at tackle, yet there's talk. If you take a look at his profile, that he probably will kick into guard. Okay, you got a depth player on your team. That's okay. Offensive line, they need to do that. But and you mentioned Suafilo. Still, Bobby Hart, who the fans just love, combine him with Suafilo on the right side, and that is one big gamble, isn't it?
It is. It is. It really feels like the Bengals are hoping a bunch of things pan out up front. They'll tell you that they believe in these guys and that they're high on them. And to their credit, what they've done this offseason, and they've maintained it the whole time, what they've done this offseason, their actions back up what they've said is, yeah, we feel pretty good about our offensive line. We like where Michael Jordan ended the year at left guard, and we think he could come in and start and play at a high level. We think Jonah Williams, despite not taking a snap last year as a rookie, can come right in and be an upgrade at left tackle. Trey Hopkins is as steady as they come at center. So that's the one non-question mark. And then we talked about it. Xavier Suafilo, I'm not trying to be mean, but if you had to label him, he's probably a bust at this point in his career. His 33rd overall pick in 2014, and now he's on his 3rd team. Didn't start in Dallas last year. And there's a question mark there, too. He primarily played left guard during his 6 years in the NFL and at UCLA.
That's been the problem all along,
right
James.
side.
So the Bengals have figured it out. He needs to go to the other side.
Exactly, right? I mean, and who knows? Maybe it works out. And then you mentioned right tackle. And it's going to be a 3-man race. Bobby Hart, obviously, probably the favorite, but Fred Johnson is certainly expected to compete there. And then you mentioned Akeem Adeniji. They do view him as a tackle. They think he does have the versatility to kick inside if they need him there, but they like him as a tackle. I wouldn't be surprised at all if they open it up to him in a competition as well during training camp. But to your point, it's a bunch of question marks. Right tackle is a question mark. Xavier Suafilo is a question mark. On the other side, Michael Jordan, 2nd-year player, was awful to start his career. And while he's young, still a question mark. And then Jonah Williams hasn't played a snap. And I get it. He's a former first-round pick, 11th overall. But are all of those things going to work out? Maybe 2 of them do. But if 2 of them don't, then what do you do at right tackle? What do you do at left guard? Or what do you do at right guard? It's tough. And here's the other thing I will say. You can only fill so many needs.
I say that all the time. As a Jet fan, I say it all the time.
And that's the thing is when you reach on an offensive lineman to fill a need, you can end up with Cedric Ogbuehi. You can end up with Jake Fisher. So I think they viewed it as, we're going to stick to our board. And they did, and they like Akeem Adeniji a lot. I think they, from what I've heard, they had a 4th-round grade on him. Again, they're going to say that, right, that they had a higher grade on him than they got him, and it's great value. We'll see what he does. Has a lot of experience, 48 college starts. So, we'll see. But, offensive line, that's the one question mark with this team. I don't mind young linebackers. I think the defensive line is going to be good. I think the secondary is much improved. The weapons on offense, you certainly can't doubt them. I think Joe Burrow's ready to perform at a high level, but will the offensive line do its part? I think that's the biggest question mark surrounding this team this season.
Let's also stress this by saying we are going to talk again before training camp when we preview training camp, and then we're going to talk again definitely to preview the 2020 season. So we will talk at least 2 more times before week 1. I would guess that another veteran will make his way onto this team at some point.
It should be Larry Warford. I've been beating that drum really since the Saints released him. I think you could sign him. He plays right guard. And now Michael Jordan and Xavier Suafilo can compete
Sure.
for that left guard spot, one of them could emerge as a starter. I'd feel confident in that, just not both of them. So now you have a Pro Bowler on the right side. You have Trey Hopkins, who is steady Eddie at center. And then the left guard spot's probably taken care of between either Suafilo or Jordan. Who knows? But I think that signing would make all the sense in the world. Another one's Jason Peters. I don't know how willing he would be to go to a non-contender at this stage of his career. It would make sense from a Bengals standpoint in my eyes, but I just think he's probably looking for more of a potential Super Bowl contender this season.
Again, you just got to keep your fingers crossed that everything works out with Jonah coming off the injury. There's a second injury to a player, a top pick, that becomes something that you don't want it to become. So hopefully he stays healthy.
Yeah, and if he does, I think there's all the makings of a quality left tackle. Like, I believe them on Williams. I remember, I think back to the Bill Belichick, Nick Saban documentary that came out last year, and they're at Alabama's Pro Day, and Belichick straight up asked, all right, which guys are good? And he's like, oh, Jonah Williams is good, and I think he said the defensive lineman. And he's like, oh, where can Jonah play?
Yeah.
And Nick said, everywhere. Anywhere you need him to play, he could play. So I think if he's saying that to one of his best friends in the business, then he believes in him. And I think Jonah can be good. You're right. He needs to stay healthy and get the experience that he desires and needs.
Okay, now there were two rookie free agents that had our lads' draftable grades, one on offense, one on defense. Receiver Scotty Washington, a really big 6'5" receiver from Wake Forest, who's got a tall, wide frame, could really be an interesting red zone target. But he's not, I mean, athletically, he's very limited upside, which is the whole reason why he had 6'5". You're a rookie free agent. And then Tyler Clark, the defensive tackle from Georgia. Second team SEC, and you're looking at a guy that has really good first and second down ability against the run. You know, that's out of the two players, I'd give Tyler Clark. Again, it's a numbers game for every team. This is where you come in to find out of those two guys who might fit best with the numbers situation at those positions. But I just think Clark has a better chance to be a long-time pro than Washington. What do you think about those two players? And I don't know if there were any other rookie free agents that they picked up that you thought were worth mentioning.
I agree with you on Clark. I think he's has the upside that you're looking for in an undrafted free agent, a guy who, with a good camp, could stick on the practice squad potentially, and then you call him up, mid-year if there's an injury or something like that. But I think he does have a real chance. Scotty Washington, it's going to be tough because that wide receiver depth chart is pretty loaded. But heck, he averaged over 17 yards per catch in college. He's a guy that has some of the physical tools you look for. You just wonder if he can. He has the speed to do it, right, to get the necessary separation that you need in the NFL. But I think those are certainly two guys that deserve mentioning. A couple more. I think Iowa State linebacker Marcel Spears Jr., he's a guy that they looked at and met with during the pre-draft process. I know that linebackers coach Al Golden likes his potential to contribute on special teams, which is a key when you're talking about an undrafted free agent potentially making the team. And so I wouldn't be shocked at all if that's a dark horse, maybe not to make the roster, but again, make the practice squad. He made 39 consecutive starts at Iowa State. And then one last one for you that stood out for me, USF tight end Mitchell Wilcox. He's a guy, set all the records, essentially school records for tight ends for the Bulls in 4 seasons. His junior year was by far his best year. He had 43 receptions and 540 yards. Last year, not as good, 28 receptions for 350 yards. Didn't have great quarterback play. And so I look at him, and if he can prove himself as a blocker, he's not a great athlete, but he's a guy who could certainly catch the ball, has reliable hands. He's got a shot. And so that's all you can ask for out of some of these undrafted free agents is, are they potentially good enough to contribute at some point? And I won't be shocked at all if one or two of these guys make the roster, depending on training camp is with injuries and things like that. And I think that a bunch of them, maybe not a bunch, but 2, 3, 4 guys on the practice squad. I think that's
Yeah, and
pretty
good point
realistic.
with the tight end situation, because when you take a look at their situation right now, of course, Azuma is a steady veteran. Eifert is finally gone, but uh, Sample, I know, is interesting because last year he was actually going to be he was one of my sleepers. And then the Bengals picked him in the second round. I was like, whoa, what is it? I didn't know he was going to go in the second round. When you,
Yeah.
I almost felt like bad for him. So that's pretty high to go to for Sam. But again, I think ability, and now he'll get his chance, hopefully, if he's healthy. I like the kid. I like what I saw from him last year. So maybe he could kind of get everybody off his back. It wasn't his fault he was picked in the second round.
Yeah, it's that's one of the main question marks going into this year is Drew Sample. He got hurt last season. He's a guy they were really high on, and I will say this: last year they were scrambling after Zach Taylor took the job because he was with the Rams until early February when they lost to the Patriots in the Super Bowl, and then they had to play catch up. So I think Drew Sample, while they liked him, it felt like a pretty big reach at the time, and it still does. So hopefully he could develop into a starting caliber tight end. And who knows, maybe Joe Burrow makes them look good by getting the most out of Drew Sample.
Again, seeing these young players, and then you've got your hopeful franchise quarterback there too. That's the whole part of how we began the show, talking about the excitement of the fan base. That if you're ever going to jump on board and be a Bengals fan, even if the Bengals don't have a winning season, and chances are they're not going to this year, that's okay. It's the process, and everybody has to join. You don't want these fans coming in, okay, now we're winning, I'll go to the games. That's nobody wants to see that. Now is the time, because you will. I think you are now. Again, I don't know what kind of coach Zach Taylor is going to end up being, because the jury is still going to be out on him until they start winning. But the talent is definitely there now, and if they can make sure that offensive line is set, this is going to be a winning team again, and maybe as soon as next year, 2021.
I agree, and I think that's kind of what they're playing for now. This team and the way the roster's been set up and the way they've built it, I think it's a lot like the 2004 Bengals, where they went 8-8. It was Carson Palmer's first year starting. You had an emerging star. Really, he had established himself as a star at that point in Chad Johnson. TJ Houshmandzadeh broke out, and you felt good about the team overall and the direction they were heading. And the very next year, they win the division. They go 11-5. And I think that's kind of what the Bengals looked at is, all right, we're going to make all these additions on defense. We're going to get a new quarterback. We're going to have some growing pains this year, especially in a tough division. But this time next year, we're going to feel really good about where we are and really making a push for the playoffs for the first time since 2015. So I think that's the plan. That's not saying that they don't think at Paul Brown Stadium that they can make a run this year at the playoffs. Andy Dalton did in his rookie season. But overall, more realistic speaking, especially considering the division, I think 2021 is the plan where they can potentially get back to the playoffs and compete.
James, great job. Good talking to you for the first time. Can't wait to do it for real regarding the 2020 season when we preview training camp. We have tentative dates now. Now we just need the final thumbs up and the go ahead, and maybe we can even get these OTA started whenever they're. I know that's happening soon. Haven't you talked about getting some of these practices in the next few weeks?
They're hoping to have some kind of mini camp, in-person mini camp. We'll see if it happens. I have my doubts. I think you could almost avoid the risk and wait till training camp, because I don't want to delay. I, like you, we're in the same boat. We want this to happen without anything, any delays or anything like that. So we'll see. Maybe minicamp rolls around. If so, we'll certainly be ready. And if not, then we just hope training camp starts on time.
Thanks, James. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.